For many coaster enthusiasts, nothing kills a ride more than something that tracks poorly throughout its layout. Personally, I don't exactly disagree. I would much rather ride a ride to be forceless rather than one that's exceptionally rough. A ride like Predator at Darien Lake is a rather good example of this, and it's one that I've gotten to experience a lot over the years. The layout's nothing spectacular, but now that you can ride it without getting instant back pain from it, hey, you know what? It's not so bad. In fact, I actually think it's pretty enjoyable now that most of it has been replaced with Titan Track, which makes you wonder if it ever becomes a new credit as a steel coaster. Perhaps a topic for a few weeks from now. The point of all this is to say that a rough ride can completely ruin the enjoyability, even if the layout might be good. Now, Bolliger and Mavillard have been a company which rarely receives criticism for constructing rough roller coasters. At least not when they were new. Yet, something has happened in recent times which is causing a lot of their new installations to give rather shaky experiences. Ever since hearing about the drop in quality, I've wondered what might be the cause of it, as have many other people. Many theories have been posted online, so I've read through as many of them as I can to try to dive in what might be the cause of it, when exactly it started, and where the company might go from here. So, without any further ado, let's get into the rundown. I got the chance to ride my first new age B&M last year with Rakshasa, and it was rather disappointing to say the least. Granted, I was not set up in the best position either. I rode it after a thunderstorm in row 3, seat 6, and it was a very hot day, maybe 85 to 90 degrees. I've never been one to get super motion sick, but temperatures definitely affect my tolerance level, and that ride was not a very good one. In the back row, anywhere that there was strong positive G's, the ride was a bumpy mess. I can't even really explain what was going wrong, but I couldn't quite see straight. Some of the sections were pretty rough. The most enjoyable sections were any of the inversions in the first drop where there's just a lot of zero gravity. I ended up getting off the ride somewhat sad that such a new, beautiful attraction with a cool layout ended up being rather unenjoyable. Later in the day, I got to ride Raging Bull. Now, it's not a glass smooth ride by any means, but the slight vibration throughout the duration was significantly more tolerable despite the ride being 25 years older than Rakshasa. So, when exactly did that start? One of the first rides to get complaints of an early rattle was Banshee at Kings Island. This seemed to be somewhat an outlier at the time and has theories that the quality of the soil at the park contribute to more vibrations throughout the structure, which is definitely possible. The real problems seemed to begin popping up after Candemonium or maybe Monster at Gronalund, which opened in 2020 and 2021 respectively. Beginning in 2022, cracks in the track record began to show. There were beginning to be mixed reports about how smooth Emperor at SeaWorld San Diego was, and then Dr. Diabolical at Fiesta Texas, both of which were dive coasters. In 2023, Mandrill Mayhem opened at Chessington with slightly subpar smoothness as well, although Pipeline at SeaWorld Orlando opening at the same times did not seem to clearly struggle from any issues with smoothness. At this point, the issue seemed to lie with rides which were suspended further from the center line of the track, something which isn't entirely inexplicable. Vibrations are able to travel along the larger lever arm to create a greater moment upon the riders, amplifying any vibrations for those who are not directly above the track. This, however, did not exactly last for too long, as the wheels really fell off for B&M 2024 and onwards. Iron Menace, Penguin Trek, Phoenix Rising, Rakshasa, Raptera, Big Bad Wolf, and now Barracuda Strike have all opened with at least some level of vibration. Now, for what it's worth, Big Bad Wolf is stated to be one of the smoother rides that have opened from B&M as of late, yet it's not quite up to the previous standard which they had set for themselves. It is at this point where one may notice that the issue is much larger than just wide carriage vehicles, as Penguin Trek is one of the worst offenders, and it's just a family coaster with two across seating. This story is one of the most disappointing ones in the manufacturing industry at this time. No longer can anyone be excited when a new B&M is announced to their park. Look at promotional posts for Tormenta, and there's likely going to be comments praying that it's not a rough mess as some of the others have been, especially with Tormenta being so much faster and larger than everything else. This brings us to the cause of the rattle, as one of the primary speculations is that the track gauge has something to do with it. This will truly be tested when Tormenta actually opens, as this is the first new age B&M to use the wider gauge track. At the time of recording this, Tormenta has just recently had some of its first riders, and the general statement seems to be that it is relatively smooth above the track, but some of the wing seating is not exactly the smoothest ride, which somewhat aligns with what might be expected, honestly. As I mentioned, one of the theories revolves around the ride vehicles constantly trying to shuffle or hunt to the center of the track. This is something which can begin to explain some of the rattle for the wider vehicles. Hunting is an enthusiast term for the shuffling of the ride vehicles as it tries to stay straight on the track. That is something which can be amplified by each of the following rows in the vehicles, as well as when the weight is beginning to be more displaced from the center of the track. This can help explain some of the side to side shifting which is experienced by riders. For a more in depth conversation on that topic, I'll link a video that I referenced in the description. This theory is the primary faith pipeline for Torment to be a smoother ride than some of the other rides which have recently opened, but looking deeper, there seems to be many more layers to this story. One of the interesting cases for me is Raptera. I looked through multiple reverse POVs of the media day, and the ride vehicles don't exactly seem to be hunting much. Granted, it's not like it's not hunting at all, but the primary shake or roughness seems to be this visible vertical oscillation, not directly caused by the ride vehicles themselves. Something that you may have seen before is the photo of the launch track for Apteria. This should immediately raise an eyebrow. I mean, what are we doing that the launch track is not straight? There's visible deflections in the track which just should not be there, something which is likely caused by the manufacturer. Obviously, the track has to be of good build quality in order for the ride vehicles to even have a chance of tracking smoothly. Smooth straight track is something which has been around for a long time without issue, so why is there a problem now? It's possible that this is some sort of connection to a decrease in quality and something with the supplier has changed. The supplier for the track and supports of these rides is Claremont Steel in Ohio, although there's not much information about the company to investigate if they have changed their ways over the years or not. It should definitely be noted that Raptera is the only roller coaster currently made by B&M that has noticeable deflections in the track. This is likely more pronounced by the section of straight track being so visible, although maybe it is the only ride with this issue. And now, a little bit of an update since the writing of this script. A rather interesting tidbit is that B&M has split off from Claremont Steel, which may be causing a large change in the future. This can have a pretty big domino effect, although I'm not going to fully explore that right now, but maybe later. This can somewhat segue into our next theory about the B&M roughness, which is its tolerances. It passes most of the mental checks. Tolerances are something which our eyes can't see, deals with cutting costs, and are a reasonable source of shuffling. If you want to watch old arrows enter the brake run, there's a good chance you'll notice that the back rows have a slight side to side shuffle. This is caused by the wheels having a little bit extra room to move, as the track to the wheels to the chassis, and so on all have their own tolerances. Every manufactured part must have tolerances, and parts can never perfectly fit together, so there's a little bit of machining error which is has to be accounted for. The lower the tolerances, the better fit of the part, but there's also progressively more cost. Tight tolerances create a large overrun in machining cost and can lead to more scrap parts, as it becomes more likely that the part is going to be machined out of spec. It does seem reasonable that post-pandemic B&M has altered their operating agreement with Claremont Steel to increase the allowable tolerances on the parts they're making. This would help to reduce the cost of manufacturing and will also probably reduce the smoothness of the ride. However, it's not certain. For example, Big Bad Wolf is said to be one of the smoother of the new B&Ms. It is possible that this ride got a lot of parts which are closer to the older tolerances. Just because the tolerance of a part has changed does not mean that every part is worse now. There will still be parts which are manufactured close to or at the previous tolerance level. It is just no longer a guarantee. There may have been a batch of parts which were all closer to the old drawing tolerances, providing a ride experience which is closer to what is usually expected from them. Barracuda's strike seems to be on the rougher side, meaning that if the tolerance theory is true, the parts may have stretched the limit of the tolerance, resulting in a bumpier ride. Even if the tolerances of the parts were only changed slightly, there's so many different parts being constructed together for the ride vehicles that the stack up tolerance will change much more significantly. Stack up tolerance is an accumulated error when multiple tolerances are assembled together. There is also potential for the materials of the ride vehicles to have changed, but there's little evidence to support this claim beyond speculation, so I'm not going to dive into that theory much. Often the truth is much more complicated than it seems. For this situation, the most likely explanation is just some combination of all of these theories. While I do tend to hold my faith in the tolerances changing, this could just be some internal bias from my personal experiences. I have a connection with tolerances from mechanical engineering and have a good understanding of how they work. Meanwhile, I don't have a in-depth understanding of how hunting may affect the smoothness of a ride, even if it is the deep-rooted cause. Unfortunately, having looked through each of the ride cases, there isn't anything that fully jumps out to me. This makes it somewhat worrisome that B&M will ever fix it. That is, if they actually want to. At this point, B&M is still selling their rides at a reduced quality, and it does not appear that they have tried to change anything, despite the fact that I am sure they are aware of it. Now, if tolerances are the issue, it doesn't explain Raptera's bounce, and if it is hunting, that doesn't explain the rattle on Penguin Trek and the inverts, really. No matter which theory you look at, there are holes which can be poked in it. For now, everyone just has to wait and see. Maybe with more data points, a better correlation can be drawn because for now, there is no one size fits all solution. Sadly, this is likely an issue which we will never receive a full explanation about. For years to come, there may be continued speculation, even if this does get fixed, but for now, the future is unclear. Surely, B&M is going to continue to exist, but for the average enthusiast, they are rapidly losing their position as a primary player in the game. For now, I will be anxiously awaiting the POV of Tormenta and wondering if it may suffer a similar fate of the rest. Thank you all so much for watching. I know that this is a topic which has been covered extensively already, but I wanted to create my own collection of theories. At this time, there is no real conclusion to be drawn, but this is definitely one where we can wait and see. Especially with Claremont Steel no longer a component of the story, we might actually be able to see some changes in the near future. It definitely does add some credibility to the fire of it being a manufacturing issue. However, that's all for now. I hope to see you all next week. Peace.